Hello and welcome to the Fit to Transform podcast, where you learn how to train and diet effectively and, most importantly, how to maintain those results for life, once and for all. I'm Nikias Tomasiello, a transgender training and nutrition coach working online with anyone who's ready for a true lifestyle transformation, anywhere they may be in the world. As a friendly reminder, any and all information provided is for educational purposes only. You should consult with your doctor before implementing any changes to your diet and exercise program. With that disclaimer out of the way, thank you for being here. Now grab yourself a cup of tea or pre-workouts and enjoy. Welcome back to the podcast. Hopefully, in this solo episode, I finally sorted out the audio issue that I've been having. Now, as for the topic of this episode, what I want to do is delineate ways to make a plan from now up until the winter holidays, spanning Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's. Whether you are in a fat loss phase right now, in a surplus, or at calorie maintenance. And whether you're a beginner, so you're literally just starting out your fitness adventure, or whether you've already been working on this for maybe a few weeks or a few months or even a few years. Now, if you want a deep dive into eating out and holiday meals, so how to plan these into a fat loss phase, a surplus or calorie maintenance, literally any calorie budget, or how to plan these into your day if you're not tracking your calories, some mindset tips on how to deal with peer pressure and how to choose the foods that you really want to eat and maybe spend more calories on, then what you want to do is tune in to episode number 19, which I released last year around the same time. It was titled Balancing Fat Loss Success with Eating Out and Holiday Meals, and you'll find a link in the description below. Now, what I want to start this episode with is a little bit of perspective. So basically mindset stuff. I'm sure you're not surprised, dear listeners. And the first topic I want to touch upon is the fact that a lot of people at this time of year will be thinking about starting their fitness journey, whether it's a diet, a training program, or both, come January. Now, my question for you, if you're thinking about this, is why start in January? Personally, I don't know anyone who ever said, I made my best gains with a Z in January. I know that this time of year can be packed with stuff to do because most people are taking at least a day or two off of work over the winter holidays, so they're cramming a lot of work on the days that they're not taking off. I understand that. However, realistically, your life is never going to be completely free for you to start your fitness adventure, right? And the more you put it off, the more time you lose that you could have spent making progress within. Not only that, but the more you put it off, the more intimidating it will feel to start this adventure. So instead of January, start now. Maybe it's not going to be the perfect training program, as in if you started in January when you had less to do at work, maybe your goal would be to do 5 sessions per week, which I wouldn't recommend to start out anyway, but let's make that example. Now, if you start now, you only have the capacity for 2 sessions per week. However, 2 sessions are so much better than nothing at all, and they are going to help you create a base for you to either increase or maintain the same frequency come January. On the other hand, if you started with 5 sessions in January, you'd have to start from the beginning. You would have no fitness base whatsoever, and you would also be trying to go from 0 to hero, or rather from 0 to 5 sessions every week. What do you think gives you the best chance of success? I think, and I've got plenty of experience coaching people through this, that starting with less and building up to more over time is a much more successful approach. And to finish off this little bit of perspective on starting in January, I just want to give a shout out to my 2 new clients, Phoenix and Heather, who got started just in this last week. I literally sent to both their welcome packs this past week, and at the time of recording this, it's Sunday, 12th of November, and you'll be listening to this this upcoming Friday. They did not wait for January to get started chasing their goal. And also, I want to give a shout out to all of my existing clients because they've never dropped off coaching. I've been coaching some of these people for literal years, and none of them has ever dropped off coaching just because it was the winter holidays. Because with the right mindset and the right approach to it, you can still be making progress even in the next 6 weeks. Which leads me on to the next perspective related topic, which is that some people talk about the holidays in quotations as if it's this big, scary, endless period from Thanksgiving all the way to January 1st. Now, let's not panic and take a breath. Assuming that you celebrate all of the holidays that I can think of over this period of time, we're talking about basically 5 days. So there's Thanksgiving, Hanukkah, Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, New Year's Eve. If you're really stretching it, then we make it 6 days because you're celebrating January 1st as well. So we're talking about 6 days over 6 weeks. So if you're really celebrating every single holiday that I can think of off the top of my head, we're talking about maybe a week out of 6. And on all of these days, we're really only talking about a single meal because that meal tends to be a little larger than the others. And in my experience, people are often so full from that one meal that it's not like they overeat from the moment they wake up to the moment they go to bed, or they also don't just lounge around all day because once you've eaten a lot, it actually makes you feel better in terms of digestion to move around and walk around a bit. So it's not like they're being couch potatoes the entire time and they're not eating their weight in insert favorite food here the entire 24-hour period. So it's not as bad as some people make it out to be. But on the other hand, I also want to acknowledge that it's true that people on average tend to gain weight. And there's actually a really interesting narrative review published by, I hope that this attempt at pronunciation is at least acceptable. So the authors are Diaz, Zavala, and colleagues. This was released in 2017. It's titled Effects of the Holiday Season on Weight Gain, a narrative review. And these authors reported that adult studies consistently show that people tend to gain on average 0.5 to zero point 0.9 of a kilogram during the holiday period. So we're talking about 1 to 2 pounds. And when you look in more detail at the study participants, the authors reported that of the studies that they wrote the narrative review about, within the studies that they wrote the narrative review about, the participants were both people who were not trying to lose weight, they were just living their normal life, and people who were trying to lose weight. And among these people, there were motivated, what the authors described as motivated self-monitoring people. So people who were weighing themselves, perhaps they were tracking their calories, they were monitoring their progress, or at least a trajectory of their weight in some way. This narrative review showed this 1 to 2 pounds of weight gain on average. Importantly, was this weight maintained or was it lost afterwards? Because the biggest problem would be if every year you gain 1 to 2 pounds over the holiday period and never lose it, then over a few years, that's quite a bit of weight that's starting to pile on. Now, what the authors said was that there were only really 2 studies in which the participants were followed up to see if the weight gained was maintained or lost. And in one study, the weight gain was actually maintained. And this was a study done in 195 adults who were all over the BMI spectrum. There were people who had a BMI below 20, people in the 25 to 30 range, also known as the overweight range, and people in the 30 plus range, which is associated with obesity. Now, in a different study, however, the study with the motivated self monitoring people that I've just mentioned, the people who engaged in the study and gained the weight actually also lost it in the follow up periods. The authors made it clear that we need more research on this specific period of time, but in my view, what these data seem to suggest is that people who are engaging in health promoting behaviors and who are actively pursuing some fitness goal, whether that's fat loss or building muscle or building strength or eating a more health promoting dietary pattern, even if these people gain some weight during the holidays, they seem to be more likely to lose it afterwards because they are working towards progress on average over time, and they're not letting themselves be held back by 6 weeks. They may have a few days where they're eating a little bit more than usual, but then they get back to their previous habits and the goals that they were chasing immediately once the holidays have ended. There was also another paper which is relevant that I found really interesting and wanted to bring up, which is titled The Effectiveness of a Brief Behavioral Intervention to Prevent Weight Gain Over the Christmas Holiday Period, a randomized controlled trial by Mason and colleagues. This study was set in the UK, and the participants were 272 adults who were aged 18 years or more, and they had a BMI of 20 or more. So half of the participants, 136 of them, were assigned to a group who underwent a brief behavioral intervention. And the remaining 136 were given a leaflet about healthy living, and they were the comparator group. So the brief behavioral intervention included regular self-weighing, and then they had to record their weight and reflect on the trajectory of their weights. They were provided information on good weight management strategies over the Christmas period, and they were given pictures, so visual information on what's called the physical activity calorie equivalent, or PACE, PACE, of the festive foods and drinks that are commonly consumed. And the goal of this group was to gain no more than half a kilogram of their baseline weight, if any weight at all. So they got all of this information, and the comparator group received just a leaflet on healthy living. And the results were the following. The intervention, the people undergoing the behavioral intervention, avoided weight gain over the Christmas holiday period. Specifically, reading off of the results of the paper, the mean weight change was actually a decrease in weight of 0.13 of a kilogram in the group that underwent the behavioral intervention, whereas the comparator group, who just got the leaflet on healthy living, actually saw an increase in weight, a mean weight change of 0.37 kilograms of weight gain, which is in line with the 0.5 to 0.9 kilogram increase in weight that I've mentioned from the other paper. So again, this is more evidence that if you are paying any attention to your weight trajectory and to your eating behaviors and exercise behaviors as a whole, you may be able to limit or completely prevent, really, any unnecessary or unwanted amount of fat gain over the holiday period. And if you're listening to this podcast, you are this kind of person. So my first piece of advice in terms of mindset is fucking relax. And I promise you that you've already lost weight just by relaxing, in that you're not going to gain any extra weight that would be caused by a spike in cortisol, because a spike in cortisol, the stress hormone, leads to water retention. Now you're not going to have this spike in cortisol because I just reassured you, so no water retention, no extra weight on the scale. You are welcome, my friends. Now, having given you this perspective, I've tried to address both sides of the coin, both the fact that these holidays are really not the end of the world, and the fact that if you pay no attention to what's happening whatsoever, they may have an unwanted outcome in terms of your body fat storage, I want to now move into the strategy that I would recommend if you are currently pursuing fat loss. And I'm also going to mention what to do if you are currently pursuing muscle gain, either in a surplus or a calorie balance. So, for fat loss, whether you're just starting out, and I believe that if you're starting out right now and you want to start a fat loss phase, you can absolutely do that. Circling back to what I said at the beginning, there's no need to wait until January, and realistically, if you celebrate 6 days out of the next 6 weeks, you can still make plenty of fat loss progress over 5 weeks and 1 day. So, why wait, right? And this applies to you, this advice for planning applies to you even if you've already been in a fat loss phase for several weeks or months. Either way, my suggestions are the following. Think about which social events, whether they involve food or not, you are going to attend. And then focus on those where you are actually going to either eat or drink or both. Now, consider which of these events you may want to eat more calories than you normally would on a day when you're at calorie maintenance at. Choose these strategically. Do you need to expect that every single of these festive days you are going to spend more calories than usual on your food? If you really, really love all of the winter holiday fare available. You love Thanksgiving food, you love Christmas food, you love New Year's food or drinks, whatever tickles your fancy. If you love all of this and you're saying, these holidays come once a year, I am going to eat more on these days, then so be it. I have respect for your choice. I have respect for all choices as long as they are informed and you're not just winging it. However, if you don't particularly like all of the food served at some of these events or all of the drinks, you can also say, I know that on Christmas Eve I am going to eat a higher calorie meal than usual, but then I don't really care about Christmas Day. I'm not really big on Thanksgiving. I live in the UK, I don't celebrate Thanksgiving. Then do you really need to count all of these social events as events when you're going to eat more than usual? So, in short, yes, you can decide to eat more, even more than calorie maintenance, even if you're not in a surplus for muscle gaining purposes at a social event. It is within your right, and there's nothing to be ashamed of. Again, I respect all choices, and I hope you do so for others as well. And if you do so, then respect your own too. So it doesn't have to be chicken, rice, and broccoli at Thanksgiving, at Christmas, and all the way through to the new year. But you don't need to eat everything in sight either just because it's there. Alright, so now you've identified all of the social occasions involving food from now until the end of the year. Now you want to consider the following questions. Do you want to stay in a calorie deficit the whole time? Because this is going to lead to you having to make different decisions than if, on the other hand, you chose to take a psychological break from the calorie deficit and set your calories at maintenance, at least on some of these weeks. If you want to take all of the 6 weeks at maintenance, more power to you. If you want to take just a week of Thanksgiving at maintenance, or just a couple of weeks over Christmas and New Year's at maintenance, that's also your choice. What I ask and encourage you to do is to be objective. Don't think I'm going to diet through everything because I want to lose all of the fat yesterday. Yes, of course, we would all love, if we are in a fat loss phase, to keep making progress from now until the end of the diet, because that means that we're going to exit the diet and the calorie deficit sooner. That's potentially true, assuming that you were able to be consistent the entire time, which may not be the case. So instead of having this thought that you're just going to push through every single holiday event and make yourself miserable and take your Tupperware to the Christmas table, ask yourself the following questions. How long have you been consistent with your diet for? Has it been just 2 weeks, 6 weeks, 8, 10, 12? And how many diet breaks, if any, have you taken within this time? And then ask yourself, has your consistency been slipping lately? And if it has been slipping, would it help you to take this break at calorie maintenance so that you can recharge your mental batteries and then smash your deficit again when you choose to go back into a deficit? Again, I know that we all want to make progress at all times, and that sometimes taking a diet break feels like stagnation. But 1 to 2 weeks at calorie maintenance is not stagnation. For one, it's not going to hold you back. I've already presented plenty of evidence showing that if you are the kind of person who's actively pursuing a fitness goal and health promoting behaviors, you can prevent or reverse any potential fat gain that might occur over these holiday periods. Besides, if you are this kind of person, you know how a calorie deficit works. And if you've been in a fat loss phase for a while, you've lost some weight already, so hopefully you're going to be able to do it again, especially if you have a good coach in your corner. So you've got this. Therefore, you're not going to be held back. But number two, being at calorie maintenance does not mean that you're going to stay exactly the same. That's why I keep saying calorie balance or calorie maintenance, because what I mean by that is that it's not muscle balance. You are aiming to keeping your fat storage unchanged. So you don't want to lose any more weight, but you don't want, well, fat rather, but you don't want to gain any more fat either. However, if you are at calorie maintenance, you're not in a deficit, which means you have the energy to build more muscle, energy that you wouldn't have in a deficit. Now, yes, it is possible to build muscle in a deficit. Some people have more of a capacity for it than others, but on average, everybody can with the right training program and the right consistency. Having said that, it is definitely more difficult than it would be if you were at calorie maintenance. So, being at maintenance doesn't mean stagnating, because you can still change your muscle mass and increase it while keeping your fat storage unchanged. All right, so at this point, you know on which events you're going to consume foods that you wouldn't normally and that you really love, and you would like to expend a bit more calories on those than at other times of the year. And you also have decided whether you are going to take a diet break and how long for. Now, if you are choosing to be in a calorie deficit over a period of time that spans one or all of these social events involving food, then you have to take into account your calorie balance over time. To be in a calorie deficit, you need to be in a net negative calorie balance over the course of a number of days or weeks. So, for example, if you choose to attend a Thanksgiving related social event but be in a deficit for the whole week, and it's important to you to consume some special food on Thanksgiving, like a slice of pumpkin pie, then you would have realistically to also be in a calorie deficit to save some calories for Thanksgiving. So you would borrow calories from other days to add them onto Thanksgiving Day so that the calorie balance for the week is still in a net deficit. So, for example, if you're dieting on 1500 calories and you want 2000 calories for Thanksgiving Day, then you want to save 500 calories over the course of that week. So you might have 5 days on 1400 calories instead of 1500, so that you can then add 500 calories on top of the 1500 that you would have on Thanksgiving Day, and you would still be in a net deficit, assuming that 1500 calories are yielding fat loss for you. This is option one, which assumes that not only you want to be in a calorie deficit, but you also want this deficit to be the exact same size as the deficit that you've been in so far. You also have option two, whereby you can still be in a deficit, but accept that it's going to be a smaller deficit. And the only difference compared to the first option I mentioned is that instead of borrowing calories from other days to add them on top of a single day, you would add 500 calories to one day and not borrow any calories from any other day. So as a result of that, you would be eating 1500 calories for 6 days and 2000 calories for one day. This means that you're going to eat 500 extra calories for the entire week compared to previous weeks in a deficit. Now, 500 divided by 7, if I do a quick Google, is 71 calories per day that you're eating above your usual deficit. Now, most people require at least around 250 to 500 calories. This is a very general figure. It depends on the individual, really. But to give you an idea, you need to be eating at least 250 calories less than your maintenance to be in a deficit that yields reasonable fat loss. If you're eating 71 calories above your current deficit, which we're assuming it does yield fat loss for you at the moment, you're not going all the way back to maintenance because you're not eating 250 to 500 calories extra every single day that week. In other words, you are still going to be in a deficit. It's just going to be a smaller deficit than the previous week. On the other hand, if you choose to take a diet break and on these days you want to, again, expend a bit more calories on certain foods, you can then make a decision between being in a slight surplus on that day and not do anything about it, or be in a slight surplus and also borrow calories for it. So again, if you want to borrow calories for it, you would follow the exact same principle in order to be, instead of in a net deficit, in a net neutral calorie balance. So that would be maintenance. So again, if you maintain on 2000 calories and you want 2500 calories on Thanksgiving Day, then you would save 500 calories during the week. Or you can choose to have more calories than your maintenance just on Thanksgiving Day and not make up for it. These would lead to a very small surplus over the course of the entire week. So potentially that is going to result in a small amount of fat gain. Once again, it's down to your choice. You will be able to lose it by just going back to your usual habits afterwards. So it's not really that big of a deal. But saving 100 calories per day so that you can have a bit of a surplus on one day also isn't that big of a deal. Because if you're eating 1900 calories for 5 days or 2000, we're talking, well, half a protein bar, given that the average protein bar is 200 calories. So you can choose either way, really. Now, from my perspective, if you are taking a diet break, you want to consider whether banking calories or saving calories and in order to stay in a net neutral calorie balance is going to be beneficial for your mindset or not. Because in my view, the main benefit of taking a diet break is the psychological benefit. You want to leave the fat loss mindset, so to speak. Because when you're on a reduced calorie budget, you have to be more disciplined. You have to make more compromises over how many social events you attend, how much you eat on a regular basis, which types of food you eat, in order to stay in a deficit and to also stay satiated. Because more highly palatable foods contain more calories, so you can eat a smaller portion, so that can make you hungrier. Now, as a result of this, you are going to accumulate some mental fatigue, which is the reason why, after a long period of dieting and losing weight successfully, or unsuccessfully even, you may feel yourself slipping and not being as consistent because you are hitting your personal diet fatigue threshold, which I touched upon, or rather, I dedicated an entire episode to And that was episode, let me find out for you immediately, episode 53, Why You Stop Sticking to Your Diet and What to Do About It, which I will also put in the show notes. So if banking calories or saving calories in order to stay at maintenance across the week is going to make you feel as if you're still in a deficit, then you're losing the mental benefit of being in a diet break. And based on the research we have right now, that seems to be really the only benefit. There seem to be no other major physiological benefits to taking a diet break. So ruining that would feel counterproductive to me. On the other hand, if banking calories, as I said, doesn't seem like a big deal to you, then knock yourself out. If you choose not to bank calories, my suggestion would be to, at the very least, give yourself a hard limit above calorie maintenance for your total calories for that one day when you're planning on being in a slight surplus. Now, this hard limit is not for you to hit. You don't have to eat the entire amount of calories that you're allotting for that day, but it's a limit to hold yourself accountable to. So instead of going YOLO and saying, hey, I planned for this day to be a higher calorie day and even a higher than maintenance calorie day, then you completely forget about all of the health promoting dietary habits that you've been building, and you end up eating 5,000 calories and feeling like shit the next day. That's not ideal. So give yourself a hard limit and make it reasonable. If you maintain on 2,000 calories, 2,500 calories sounds about reasonable, but 4,000 calories, not so much. And I'm not even really talking about the fact that you are going to gain more body fat the larger the surplus that you're in across a period of time. I'm really just talking about the immediate effect of being such a massive surplus, which is that the next day you're going to feel sluggish, you're going to feel low energy, you're going to feel really stuffed and bloated. It's going to be absolute shit, and I don't want that for you. So now you have a plan. You're not putting off thinking about the holidays and hoping for the best, because then you're going to wing it if you take this approach. You've already made a plan and you've covered your dietary strategy. Now, you also want to think about your training or exercise related strategy, which I am going to discuss in a lot more detail in the next part of this podcast, which is going to be all about muscle gain. Dear listeners, not for the first time, I've realized that I spent a lot of time talking to myself, so I decided to break this episode into two. So tune in next Friday to hear the rest of it. For now, thank you so much for listening. If you want to start working with me, please sign up for coaching via the link in the show notes, because, as I've said throughout this episode, or rather at the beginning of the episode, why wait until January when we can start making gains with a Z together now? Other than that, I really appreciate your time, and until next week. Lastly, if you want to support the podcast and help me reach more people, please leave a 5-star rating or review on any podcast platform that you're using. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll speak to you soon.